Once upon a time, during a late-night cinema chinwag, a friend of mine defiantly opined, "I dare anyone to summarize Donnie Darko in just one sentence." To which I immediately responded, "One boy's search for God." This caused my friend to tilt her head, give it a thought, and then admit,
"Damn it, Donnie, why do you gotta get so smart on us?"
Now, this isn't to make myself sound smart. I am, in fact, an idiot. But to point out that despite its complex web of characters, bizarre visuals, political debates...
I'm voting for Dukakis.
Pseudo-scientific discourses, teen angst, time travel mind fuckery, white picket fence Americana excoriations, deus ex machina machinations, and great comedic timing.
He asked me to forcibly insert the lifeline exercise card into my anus!
Donnie Darko is a much simpler story about an out-of-place, overly analytical teenage intellectual.
So smart on us.
One who's unable to convince himself God exists.
The search for God is absurd.
It is if everyone dies alone.
Does that scare you?
I don't want to be alone.
Yet, throughout the film, not only does Donnie come to believe in God, but takes comfort in the knowing, as it means none of us ever truly die alone. I don't blame anyone for not picking up on what seemed pretty obvious to me, and maybe to you too, now that I've pointed it out. Because of all the many other elements I mentioned, these little knitting needle threads so intricately woven together that encourage the viewer to poke, prod, and pull at any one of them and see what gently unravels. Except, I think a granular examination over every little detail to uncover and explain what it all means ultimately makes Donnie Darko a weaker narrative, which honestly may be the fault of the writer-director Richard Kelly himself, who seemed not to understand the deeper meaning of his own film, as the director's cut, released in 2004, doubles down on the pseudo-scientific explanation of what it all means, diluting Donnie's personal journey of existential dread assuasion into a hard facts corkboard red thread breakdown about tangent universes, water-based superpowers, and saving all of mankind. And we're doing it all over again with Alan Wake 2.
This story is a monster.
Like Donnie Darko, Alan Wake 2 has an intricate web of characters, pseudo-scientific discourses, time travel mindfuckery, white picket fence Americana excoriations, deus ex machina machinations, and great comedic timing.
Oh shit, this coffee is shit.
But also like Donnie Darko, Alan Wake 2 is a much simpler tale than any granular examination over every little detail to uncover and explain what it all means would ever suggest, as it's practically buried under its mountainous amount of plot points, of ties that bind back to the first game and beyond, alternate realities folding in and on themselves, and character connections that span clear across the newly christened Remedyverse. Every tenuous detail calcified by canonical answers for those willing to dig deeper. And, like Donnie Darko, I think this dream weaverly assemblage of a spirograph plot weakens the narrative and threatens to overshadow what it's really about, diluting it to a hard facts corkboard red thread breakdown about tangent universes, mistaken identities, mistaken dual identities, and metamasters of many meta commentaries.
Very meta indeed.
Which may be the fault of the writer-director Sam Lake himself, though I wouldn't exactly accuse him of misunderstanding his own work. He may understand all too well, as Alan Wake 2 is as much about himself as it is about any particularly fictional character. But if some late-night chinwagger were to defiantly opine that I can't describe Alan Wake 2 in just one sentence, I'd state, without a moment's hesitation, it's an examination of the creative process viewed from within and without the creation itself.
Wow.
Yay!
It's in the way the game represents inspiration, local folklore massaged into murder mysteries, a witch's heart mirrored in a ritualistic sacrifice, a drowned girl reimagined into a hotel tub homicide, urban legends relevant kept through generational word of mouth, an unending conversation between two likenesses, music, television, cinema, even super low-budget commercials only local known.
I'm very busy wearing a turtleneck and drinking wine like an asshole.
All art springs from the same sources: birth and rebirth, inspiration, creation, borrowed bits of the collective unconscious, reconfigured, recontextualized, reabsorbed. But inspiration alone is not enough. An idea is quick to come by. Bringing a blank page to life is another thing entire. An oftentimes torturous succession of vision and revision, breakthroughs and setbacks, euphoric peaks and self-loathsome valleys. Writing is easy, American author and screenwriter Gene Fowler once said. All you do is stare at a blank sheet of paper until drops of blood form on your forehead. Alan Wake has been trapped within the dark place, a shadow realm of nightmarish dream logic for the last 13 years. 13 years stuck in a room, struggling to white-knuckle pry the book inside his head out. A miserable half-life of being left alone with your own thoughts. Thoughts that, to a writer, can feel as vibrant and alive as the real world they occupy. There's a moment early on when Alan crawls through a burned-out subway train as dead echoes ring in his ears. Formulating horror, constructing the macabre, requires you to not only think the unthinkable, but focus on it. Live within it. Make it feel real until it rings true on the page. And sometimes, those unthinkable thoughts become a sharp needle, worrying away at worn vinyl grooves, like dead echoes in a subway. Yet, a writer's work has only just begun once the words "the end" or "fade to black" are typed out. Writing is rewriting, as the old axiom goes, or as Terry Pratchett once put it, the first draft is just the writer telling themselves the story. Or as Ernest Hemingway so eloquently said, the first draft of anything is shit. A writer must then reduce, revise, restructure all manuscriptic aspects to best service the story they wish to tell. A laborious process made in-game literal, as the player can freely swap note cards on a storyboard in Alan Wake's writer's room, which then alters the dark place around him. A luxurious hotel lobby, now coated in slick, fresh gore. A dark back alley, brought to light by the splash of berries and cherries. Or a satanic cult, revealed to be that most terrifying thing of all, Maroon 5 fans. Except later, it's revealed Alan's already gone through the revision process before. As soon as he thinks the novel is complete, a doppelganger named Mr. Scratch, as in scratching out edits, you get it, bursts into the writer's room and shoots Alan in the head, repeating the loop, sending him back to the drawing board, again and again, for over 13 years. And yet, even later than that, it's revealed Mr. Scratch never really existed. That it's been Alan the whole time. Literally and metaphorically, unable to get out of his own way. But, to be honest, this was a twist I saw coming a mile out. Not just because it's heavy, ham-fistedly foreshadowed by everyone's favorite Eurovision number, they're singing the quiet part out loud. This song contains no subtext. There's a separate moment that clued me into the twist. One of the locations Alan explores while in the dark place is the New York apartment he shared with his wife Alice, who, according to the granular plot details, has been haunted by the ghost of her dead husband nightly for years, until she seeks desperate relief. To self-prove her uncrazy, Alice sets up a camera system that fires off immediately when the front elevator opens. Proof positive of the apparition's existence. And yet, As soon as the photo was revealed, I recognized it for what it was. It's not a photo, it's a mirror. Not just of Alan, though. I was staring at my own reflection. To put it bluntly, my wife, my actual flesh and blood wife, doesn't like who I become when I write. And I can't blame her. Obsessive, irritable, impatient, unengaged. A rash of negative behavior whose most potent moment is the one after I tear away from my work and return to the world beyond the page. Like Alan, returning home, night after night, tormented by a book he can't finish. This isn't the photo of an evil doppelganger or an astral projection. Once again, the truth is much simpler than that. It's of a writer. And sometimes we can be monsters, especially to those we love. And then there's the people of Bright Falls themselves. Residents so well realized, down to the color of their socks, they feel they can leap right out of the screen. Which makes sense because they supposedly are real. Except this isn't real life, it's a video game. These aren't real people, they're fictional characters. Every one of them at the mercy of an author. What happens to a fully realized, well-defined, willful character with a complex interiority when they're forced to change without their knowledge or consent? What would that do? Not simply to a character, but to a person. Will they remember who they were? Are they aware anything occurred at all? And what if it happens again and again and again? But then there are characters whose personalities aren't malleable. Characters so entrenched in the collective unconscious, their stories told and retold by each passing generation, that their die is diamond set, immune to an author's manipulations, else they'd cease to be. Who are not only capable of resisting Alan's revisions, but demand to be reverted back to their archetypical selves.
I won't let the horror story take Logan and Casey. They were dragged into this. They need to survive. Non-negotiable.
These characters exist outside the bounds of any one work of art, any one artist, unchanged, eternal. So it's only fitting that Saga Anderson, the dual protagonist and granddaughter goddess of storytelling, gives Alan what he truly requires, an editor. And finally, what happens to a work of art once carved out of the author and released into the wild? How does it change our world, or the creator themselves? Will it come to define them? Will they strain against that definition? Will that work inspire others and continue the cycle? But what if the work outgrows the creator? What if the creator is no longer necessary?
You don't have to kill me. Don't do it. Very meta indeed.
So there it is. That's what Alan Wake 2 is all about. Except, it's a bit more complicated than that, isn't it? Or a lot more complicated, if we're being honest. Like the director's cut of Donnie Darko, Alan Wake 2 spends the bulk of its runtime unnecessarily over-explaining the insignificant, weaving complicated connections betwixt the smallest of details, obscuring its themes under an avalanche of lore. American filmmaker Howard Hawks once said, "A great movie is 3 good scenes and no bad ones." And while Alan Wake 2 does have quite a few good scenes, baby, it sure has a lot of bad ones. The real cake taker being anything having to do with Saga's mind place, where she lays out literal red threads between all the granular details. A menial task that the player has to return to constantly, although sometimes Saga will do the grunt work for you.
Don't need to go over all this again.
Which led me to think, oh hey, maybe I don't need to engage with the boring corkboard lore, only to discover an hour after I stopped that nope, you definitely do, or else certain puzzles won't solve themselves. The case board is bad enough, but then there's also the character profiles, where Saga will delve into someone's thoughts and extract information.
Okay. Wow. How did you put that together?
It's evidence.
Now, character profiles are an interesting idea, and play into the concept of Saga being an omniscient narrator, but my issue with them is what I like to call the Tina and Dina parallax.
Tina talks like this. Dina talks like this.
When Saga profiles a person, sometimes there's a green light, and other times she profiles a person, there's a red light. Other than that, barely anything changes. The camera is fixed in place, Saga's expression stays the same, though sometimes she'll frown. Ooh, variety. The real-life FMVs stay the same, though maybe they're on the left this time instead of the right. Oh! Every single time there's a character profile, you either get Tina or you get Dina. Two slight variations of the exact same cutscene. Which wouldn't be that big of a deal if it was optional, but like the case board, you have to do it or else the game won't advance. And there's a lot of them. Just like there are a lot of echoes on Alan's side of the story. Minuscule warps in reality that open a window through time, showing Alan a historical event that will often give inspiration for one of his hot-swapping note cards. Therefore, they are not optional. For every champion of light, for every drug-fueled brainstorm session, every hilarious commercial, all of which do meet the Howard Hawks' great movie quantification, there are dozens of Tinas and Dinas.
Ah, Dina, you're in more trouble than you're worth. So long, Dina.
As a writer, Alan Wake 2 spoke to me in a very specific way. I recognized a lot of myself in Alan, which, that's probably not a good thing. And I can honestly say, even though I personally may not have enjoyed it as much as I would have liked, I am happy that Alan Wake 2 exists. Just like I'm happy Donnie Darko exists. Two thought-provoking pieces that are both better than the sum of their parts, yet somehow less than what they all mean. I'm happy to see players excited at the untapped potential of video game narratives. I'm happy it's provided so much grist for the critical mill, and that it's inspired people to make their own art and continue the cycle. I'm happy people are shouting from the rooftops about how much they love Alan Wake 2. I just wish they were shouting about a different game. I wish more people shouted about Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. Developed by Simogo and released in 2024, Lorelei and the Laser Eyes is a puzzle game by way of PlayStation 1 survival horror that utilizes tank controls and fixed camera angles to great effect as the player guides a woman with impeccable fashion sense through an old European grand hotel, solving a frankly absurd number of riddles, all while trying to figure out why they're there in the first place. What initially seemed like a disparate collection of brain teasers gently unfurled itself over the course of my 18-hour playthrough into the most comprehensive examination of art, the creative process, collaboration, the mental and physical toll art takes on the artist, and the lingering effects art has on its audience and the audience on its art. Lorelei and the Laser Eyes is a game that counts on a player's natural curiosity to examine the granular, turns it into its central fascinating mechanic, and rather than get lost in the weeds of what it all means, never loses sight of what it's really about. This game, enacted by high-fashion mannequins, reduced me to open-mouthed, ugly tears with the sheer scope of its all-encompassing artistic treatise. Put otherwise, Lorelei and the Laser Eyes is not a red-threaded corkboard. It's an intricate tapestry, and everyone should play it. I won't say much more than that, as this is one you definitely should go into as blind as possible. But I will say that practically anything you loved about Alan Wake 2, you can find it in Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. True, it may lack tentpole show-stopping water cooler moments, but if Alan Wake 2, for better or worse, is our illustrious Donnie Darko, then Lorelei and the Laser Eyes is our modernist Mulholland Drive.
Very meta indeed.